You've probably heard that sitting all day is bad for you, but the reality is worse than most people realise, even for those of us who exercise regularly. 4 months ago, I ended up with 2 rebounders, and it turns out that they provided me with an unexpected solution. I'm Ruth, retired doctor turned health coach and nutritionist, and in this video I'll explain the science behind being sedentary and how rebounding genuinely revolutionised my daily routine. If you're doing moderate exercise for 150 minutes a week, just like the guidelines advise, and hopefully doing some strength work too, then you'd expect that to protect your health. But it might not, because most of us are doing something 8 hours a day which partly undoes all that good work. Yep, I'm talking about sitting. A sedentary lifestyle is very bad for us. It's associated with a higher risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, and all-cause mortality, so dying from any cause. Common sense says that exercise is healthy and sitting isn't, but the truth is more nuanced. This study set out to see whether the current exercise recommendations counteracted the effects of prolonged sitting. They looked at a large sample of twins and measured the ratio of total cholesterol to HDL cholesterol, which is a marker for metabolic health, and BMI. And yes, I know BMI is a little bit of a flawed measurement, but it is widely used in research. Because they used twins, they were able to adjust the data for the impact of genetic factors. On average, participants sat for 8.58 hours a day. A sedentary lifestyle was associated with a worse total to HDL cholesterol ratio, and critically, this was not buffered by current activity recommendations, i.e. that's 150 minutes of moderate activity a week, although vigorous activity did lower levels. However, this study was done in younger people. If we move to 2 large observational studies in postmenopausal women. Firstly, this one, looking at 5,355 women. So sitting for under 6 hours a day or adequate physical activity reduced cardiovascular and all-cause mortality, but a combination of the two even more so. Secondly, this study looked at 92,234 women aged 50 to 79. There was a linear relationship between sitting time and mortality, so more sitting time equaled more mortality, and that persisted even when controlling for other things, including physical activity. So physical activity didn't affect the relationship. So regular exercise is, of course, necessary, but it turns out it's not always sufficient on its own unless you're doing a decent amount of strenuous activity. I've said it before and I'll say it again, your dumbbells might not save you from your desk chair. But if exercise isn't always enough, then what does the body need? And the answer lies in how we burn energy each day. Think about all the small movements you make, so going up and down stairs, putting the bin out, making a cup of tea or coffee, fidgeting and gesticulating. Now, I occasionally get comments telling me I gesticulate too much and to stop it because it's distracting. But I'm afraid it's just me, and I do talk with my hands, and it turns out that it's actually good for me. So I'm really sorry, you'll have to scroll on by if you don't like it, because it's how I express myself and I'm probably not going to be able to stop. This movement might feel trivial, but it's not. And for most people, this is because exercise isn't the biggest contributor to their daily energy burn. I'm not counting athletes here, just regular people. This is a pyramid of our daily energy expenditure. 70% or so is our basal or resting metabolic rate. These are the processes that keep us alive when we're doing nothing and we haven't eaten. When we have eaten, that uses 10% of our daily energy needs to digest. It's called the thermic effect of food. Exercise makes up around 5%, but this 15% is called NEAT, and that stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That's the energy burned by all those small and seemingly trivial movements. It has a bigger effect than exercise. As 15% of total daily energy use, NEAT outweighs gym sessions for most of us, and that number kind of flips our priorities. So if what we need is regular daily movement, the obvious problem is friction, so the things that stop you doing it. And that's where my experience with the rebounder surprised me. Well, rebounders plural. For a bit of context, I'll briefly explain how I ended up with two. In January, I bought a Bellicon, and I was also sent a Beacon Softland Pro by Fed Fitness to review. I'll link the review outlining my thoughts and the evidence behind rebounding at the end and in the description. But in summary, I like them both, although they do lie at very different price points. Now, as you've seen, this is a sponsored video, and it will in fact be my last sponsored video. I want to concentrate on my own business, so my community, fed and focused, and I know that some viewers really don't like sponsored content because of the potential for bias. And yes, that potential is real, and yes, your opinion matters to me. My approach has been to only work with companies I like and whose products I've personally tried. And Fed Fitness have genuinely been great to work with. They're based in Texas, and I'm still loving the fact that they partner with the Houston Rockets, because basketball is an eternal mystery to me, but it looks terribly exciting. And in case you're interested in the 40-inch Beacon Softland Pro, it comes with spare high tension bungees, a handle, a phone holder and 2 pairs of non-slip socks. It comes mostly pre-assembled, you've just got to put the legs on, which is pretty easy, and it's got a £400 weight limit. Now, it normally retails at $299.99 USD or $269.99 British pounds. However, there is a whopping 29% off for Amazon Prime Day, which is actually a few days from the 23rd to the 26th of June. And they've upgraded my code, DrRuth05, so you get an extra 10% off in the US. The links are all in the description, so thank you, Fed Fitness. Now let's move on to how these two rebounders got me moving more. There's a logistical and motivation barrier to daily movement breaks. You can walk around your house, but I don't. I don't find it very interesting. My house isn't very big, and I tend to get very focused on my work. I've got to use screen reading and dictation software because of an eye condition, so I swear everything takes 3 times longer than it used to. So even with reminder alarms, I find it difficult to step away from my desk. Going outside to the garden isn't appealing when the English weather isn't behaving, which is often, and my garden isn't very big either. And a walk further afield means putting on shoes and sorting out Jerry, our poodle pup, which breaks my concentration. When I acquired the rebounders, I envisaged doing full-on cardio workouts, not quite like these ladies on Instagram. I don't move that quickly, ever, but something reasonably aerobic. And I do those. My favourite channel on YouTube is Earth and Owl, so go give Nikki a follow. Her workouts are accessible and adaptable to all fitness levels. But you don't have to get that adventurous. For those of you not in the know, there is something called the health bounce. It took me a while to get it. You have to push your feet down into the mat rather than bouncing up off it, but it does work your legs. And when I made my first rebounder video, what struck me were the number of women in the comments saying, I just use it for 5-minute intervals throughout the day. So I decided to give that a go, and it has worked a treat. A few minutes of health bouncing combined with a few jumping moves and marching on the spot. And I've stuck to it because the rebounder is a friction remover for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's just there. I can take a short break and I don't have to think too hard about what I'm doing or go very far, so I can come back to my desk and I haven't lost my focus. And secondly, it's fun. There is something very childlike about bouncing. It's joyful. It puts a smile on your face if you're having a stressful day. So for me, it's had mental health benefits too. So the unexpected benefit of rebounding for me wasn't the exercise. It was that it effectively removed every excuse I'd ever had for not taking a 5-minute break. And that's my experience. But what does the evidence say about the benefit of small movement breaks? Well, it turns out they have a name. Well, 3 names. So exercise snacks, snacktivity. I mean, come on, how can you not love that one? or the slightly more dreary, vigorous, intermittent lifestyle physical activity, or VILPA for short. The definition of an exercise snack does vary. These authors described it as bouts of vigorous activity lasting up to a minute, performed 15 to 18 times a day. These authors, a little broader, expanding the definition to short bouts of higher intensity exercise, which can be aerobic or strength, or embedded into the activities of daily living, for example, fast walking when commuting. And whilst this variety in how an exercise snack is defined does limit comparison of different research studies, there does appear to be an association with a reduction in cardiovascular disease. And these researchers got a little bit more experimental. They took 18 overweight and obese young men who sat for 8.5 hours a day, and they looked at 4 activity patterns. So 1, just sitting, 2, or 1 30-minute walk a day, or 3, 3-minute walks every 45 minutes, or 4, 10 squats every 45 minutes. They measured their blood glucose response after eating a standard meal and muscle contraction in the quads, glutes, and hamstrings. It's a small study, but the 45-minute activities have more of an effect than the longer walk, and the squats had the biggest effect on blood glucose. And this study also found that frequent smaller breaks are associated with a bigger drop in blood fat, specifically triglycerides, when compared to one longer break. This is because muscle contraction does 2 things. So firstly, it moves receptors called GLUT4 receptors to the surface of muscle cells so they can take glucose out of the bloodstream. Secondly, it activates an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, which deals with the blood triglycerides. The body is flipping clever, basically. So what we can conclude from the science is that moving little and often beats big and infrequent, but there's no set length or number of times a day. Every hour for a few minutes is great, but it's about finding what works for you and your schedule. And you don't need a rebounder to do this because, let's face it, if you work in an office, a rebounder at your desk is not a practical option. I've had clients who use a walking pad at a standing desk during meetings, but everyday movements count as well. So taking the stairs rather than the lift or elevator, even walking to get a coffee. But if you are at home for much of your day, then a rebounder is a great way of making the process frictionless and fun. So rebounder or not, now you know what the body needs beyond your gym membership and a concrete habit to start that will hopefully extend your lifespan, and what's not to love about that. And if you want to find out all about the science of rebounding, as well as my full review of the Becan and the Bellicon, I'll leave it here and I'll see you there.